Name is Hamid Qayyum. I'm the head of marketing for the Terra Group. We work in the ESG space. So Melanie, you're safe. No questions, no meetings necessary for us. But I have Ross here with me. Ross is the director of CRM and lifetime marketing at Amtrak. And Ross is going to make my life really easy. So we're going to talk about Ross and how he got to Amtrak, and then we're going to go through a slide deck. So Ross, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at Amtrak.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hamid. Been at Amtrak 10 and a half years at this point, which is surprising. I mean, the time has just flown by, but I've hopped around transportation for all of my career. So I actually started very early on in the airline industry, spent a little time with JetBlue while I was going to school, and really more in a customer-facing role, but that was really eye-opening. So this was in the first decade at JetBlue. There was still a little bit of a startup culture there. We were doing things differently. Front-end employees were empowered. It was a just very eye-opening experience of having a customer-centric culture. It was 2008. I had an offer to go to corporate down in New York, and oil was $140 a barrel, and everyone was talking about cuts. So I said, I have to get out of here. I can't be the last guy in the door. And I switched. I said, what does well in a high oil environment? I switched over to public transit. So very, very different, very public sector. No one cares about revenue. It's ridership, political concerns, and really worked in more on the data side for a while. So doing some operational work for them, some customer-facing technology improvements. Let's get our data on Google Transit so people can plan their trips. Let's put Wi-Fi on our commuter buses so people can work as they take the bus to work. So that type of work. I switched over in 2014 to Amtrak. So to be honest, I missed having travel benefits. I could fly for free with JetBlue. I said, I got to get back into a job that lets me travel. So looked around. Amtrak had an opening and actually ended up in pricing and revenue management for them. So was overseeing our pricing strategy and our allocations for a lot of our routes in the Northeast. Acela was the big one, which is our high-speed service, Boston, New York, DC. So did that, a lot of the New York State, Vermont, Northeast routes. From there, got back more into the marketing side of things. So a position opened up in loyalty, and that's really where I've spent the bulk of my time at Amtrak, was with Amtrak Guest Rewards, Amtrak's loyalty program. So I really focused on the operational side of the program and digital experience. So as a customer comes to our various digital touch points, if they want to redeem their points, what capabilities do they have? How do we present data to them? How do we customize the program on the app? All of that. And then just very recently, we've made some strategic changes within Amtrak. So I have come over to the CRM side of the house to lead Amtrak's CRM strategy. So CRM used to be a part of the loyalty program. We were looking at both customer and non-customer, but it was really considered a subdivision of loyalty. And we have new leadership. It's a very exciting time at Amtrak. And so we have split out and now have a dedicated CRM practice at Amtrak that we are standing up and rolling out. And that has really just taken place in the last few months. So it's a very exciting time as we start to define that strategy, define where we want to go and how we really want to execute holistic CRM at Amtrak.
That's great. So can you give us some background on, what are some of the new innovations that are happening?
Yeah, so it's a really exciting time to be at Amtrak. Hopefully, most of the folks in the audience are familiar with us, have ridden us, since we're having this today right along the Northeast Corridor, our major route. But Amtrak is growing a lot. There is a renewed interest in passenger rail, largely because of sustainability, because of urban living, because of shifting demographic trends. So we are looking to meet the moment there and expand our services, our capabilities, and that can look very different depending on where you are in the country. So in the Northeast here, where we have a very established brand, a very established base of customers, that's going to look like new trains, new service. So starting later later this year or early in 2025, we will have our new Acela train set. So Acela is our high-speed service, New York, DC, Boston, Philadelphia. We have train sets coming in the next few years, so for our regional service. But nationally, that looks like us going into markets where there's either very limited train service today or no train service at all. So as you think about how we engage with our customer base, a shocking percentage of Americans, and I say shocking as someone who's grown up in the Northeast, has grown up around passenger rail. But as you look nationally, a shocking percentage of Americans have never been on a passenger train, and at least in their own country. And so as we look into how do we go into these markets, you take a market like Phoenix to Tucson, for example. You have huge cities, growing cities. You have a big university on one end, major city on the other. They are 2 to 3 hours apart. That is the perfect distance to connect those type of cities with passenger rail. And if we go into a market like that, how do we onboard customers? How do we take people who have never really had the train as part of their consideration set, maybe don't know what's involved in riding a train? They know the airport experience. They know what it's like to drive. But how do we get those customers, get them thinking about Amtrak, become part of the consideration set, and then make sure they have a great journey? So that's really what a lot of my team is going to be focusing on, is ensuring that once you begin to think about Amtrak, once you book that trip, how do we make sure that's a great trip? We have the relevant communications for you, where you know where you need to go, what you need to do. You don't need to arrive 3 hours early at an Amtrak station. There may not be a lot to do at particularly some of our smaller stations. There's no security to go through. So how do we customize the messaging based on who you are, where you're riding, what your experience with our services are? So that's really the next frontier we're looking to get into.
Okay. So when you do enter these new markets, right? So you're going into these new areas, and I'm looking forward to the Florida expansion and everything. So how do you guys determine that this is a market we're going to go into?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And really, just as a little background, any infrastructure in the United States has some form of public support. So you think about an airline, JetBlue, for example, or Delta, they are flying into and out of airports that are funded by federal dollars through the FAA. Delta does not go and build the airport. They don't build the terminal, right? That is infrastructure that they utilize, that they pay a fee to use. And it's very, very similar within passenger rail, that there is public support. We own a portion of our routes. We own certainly within the Northeast, but everywhere else we are operating on infrastructure that that's owned either by a private freight railroad or a state. So as we look at these markets, one of the things that we've done, this is a map of population growth against our existing routes and future potential routes. So this is really a partnership that we form with states and localities that want to launch service. So within the infrastructure we own, we have control. But if you take an example like Arizona, or we just launched expanded service up to Minneapolis, between Chicago and Minneapolis. That is something that there is a public process where the state says we want to improve the service to our citizens in the state. We want to open this up, and then they work with us as an operator. So, Wisconsin and Minnesota have just gone through this process. We're in conversations with Gulf Coast states right now, looking at some expansion out of New Orleans. We went up to Burlington, Vermont. We extended a train in the state of Vermont about 2 years ago to serve the largest city in Vermont, Burlington. So it is something that we look at where there is potential. But there is also typically a public engagement process that occurs where states say, yes, this is something that we want to do, and we want to bring Amtrak in to operate that service.
So is it kind of a top-down or bottom-up? Is it people asking, or is it you guys go and say, hey, we want to do this, what do you think?
It's all of the above. So this graphic that we've got on the screen is out of our Amtrak Connects Us plan. So if you Google Amtrak Connects Us, there's a great report and accompanying website on all the places we think would be great for passenger rail. So that's looking at infrastructure being in place, size of population, demographics, time of trip over the infrastructure that exists, all sorts of factors. So we've identified identified a lot of high priority corridors that we think passenger rail could be very successful. But there is also the bottom up approach. So we've identified those. There has to be a willingness from states or other entities and the citizens of the states to say, yes, this is something we want to do. So it's really on both ends that occurs.
Okay. So looking at CRM now, right? So what is your vision of use of CRM to kind of drive some of these innovations and routes and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So really what we are looking to do is leverage, we have a tremendous amount of customer data. So one of the advantages we have is almost, I don't want to say almost all, but upwards of 90% of the transactions we process all of our bookings are done on our own channels. So that really gives a tremendous opportunity for first-party data. We have a lot that's a little different than airlines or hotels where OTAs, online travel agencies, play a much bigger role. We have traditionally not played in that space. So most of our bookings are direct. The exceptions are really travel agents, and then if you're booking through a Concur or a similar platform for corporate B2B bookings. But we really have the opportunity to capture, to customize all the way through the booking process because most customers are coming to our digital channels to book. So really what we're looking to do is, one, making sure that we're capturing the right information, and then we're leveraging that for customization. So one of the challenges that Amtrak has is we are extremely diverse in our business. You have long distance trains that have sleepers, dining cars that are traveling thousands of miles over multiple days. The type of person who buys a sleeper, who does it, that can be a once-in-a-lifetime experience where someone is doing this incredible trip they've always dreamed of, taking the train across the country. And then you have our business travelers in the Northeast who may be on the train 2 or 3 times a week, every single week. And the experience, the onboard experience, the equipment, the booking, the rates, all of that varies tremendously. And there's just very, very different regional variation. So really we're coming from a place where historically our customer communications, our web experience, our app experience was a little more one size fits all. And we're really trying to mature that and take the data we already have. We're in that fortunate position where our first party data is very, very diverse, but it historically has not been connected to our digital channels in a way that's going to really drive effective personalization. There are channels that are a little more mature. Email, for example, is something that historically we've invested in, but our leadership has charged us to go beyond email in 2025 and to really start doing that type of personalization and customization across a diversity of touch points. So as we talk about a customer who is new to Amtrak, and whether that's new in the Northeast and they've just never tried Amtrak before, maybe they are a college student going away for the first time, or a new customer out in Minneapolis who's just heard about this new service we've launched and says, I'm going to go and take a weekend trip to Chicago, or someone who is planning that once in a lifetime overnight vacation in a sleeper to go across the country to see the Rockies. Taking all of those different segments and making sure that the information that we are delivering to you is relevant. So for an example, we are launching in the next few months a very highly customized pre-trip email. So you'll see pre-trip communications from hotels, rental cars, airlines. That's very common. The airline experience, whether you are flying out of Minneapolis or Denver or Chicago, is relatively similar. That is not the case for Amtrak. Our stations, our boarding procedures, it varies a lot whether you're in New York, whether you're in Chicago, whether you're traveling. We serve towns that have populations measured in the hundreds. And the experience there getting on board, what you need to do is very different. So customizing that communication based on where you're going, what train you're on, what class of service you're in, but also who you are. So do you take us every week? You're not going to want to have your inbox flooded with these pre-trip communications with all of this detailed information information about Train 101, how to ride, how to get on board if you're riding with us every week. But that is really relevant for a first-time rider. So tailoring those communications and then building that consistent thread of information across our digital touch point. So you get that in the email, but if you go into the app, which most of our customers are using to display their tickets on day of departure, that information flows through, that there's not that disconnected experience, which, to be honest, has historically been the case with Amtrak. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is leverage a lot of that first-party data to really customize the experience based on your ridership patterns, the route you're taking, and the geography. And where that may vary also is depending on not just who you are, but what you're riding. So you may be a rider, a very frequent business traveler in the Northeast, and suddenly you decide to take the auto train, a very unique product we have that runs from the DC area, just in Northern Virginia, down to Sanford, Florida, right by Orlando. And you can actually drive your car up, you put your car on the train, and you ride that overnight with your car, and you have your car in your destination, whether that be DC or Florida or wherever you're ultimately headed. And so that is a very, very different experience than riding a Acela between New York and Boston. And so taking that into account as we do the customization, that you may be flagged in our system segmented as a high-frequency business traveler, but this is your first time on the auto train. And so the type of information you need to know is very different. If you ride the auto train every year, and this is very common, we have snowbirds who year after year after year, they know we load our inventory in the system 11 months to the day of departure, and they are on the phone the moment our contact center opens, the moment that inventory is loaded to get their trip for next year, right? That is a different experience that customer needs. So leveraging all of that first-party data to customize it.
Yeah, I'm one of those folks, so it's great. I'm also one of the folks that commute back and forth to different spots in the Northeast, and Amtrak is a godsend. But nothing's perfect, right? So how do you guys use CRM to handle issues and communicate those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an increasingly relevant topic. So one thing is, within the Northeast, we are generally between New York, Philly, DC, and then New York and Boston. We are the time competitive option on Acela. It's a toss-up every year. Some paper runs a contest where they send one person on a plane and one person on Acela. But and it's depending on the delays and whatnot, it can go. Weather and stuff, it's a toss-up there. But certainly between a market like New York and Philly, between New York and DC, we are the time competitive carrier, downtown to downtown. We are the dominant carrier. We look at a metric called air rail share, how much is going to the airline market, how much is going on board our trains. And so operational reliability is key with that. One of the reasons people are choosing us is we are not subject to the type of weather delays, air traffic delays that you might have getting on board a plane. And so when things do not go right, it is important to fix them. The other dynamic that's happening is we are really entering a time where there is unprecedented investment in passenger rail. So our infrastructure between New York and Boston, a lot of the major infrastructure assets, the tunnels right here in Baltimore, were built closer to the Civil War than they were built to today. And so they are in need of tremendous overhaul, or in some cases, complete rebuilding. And the exciting thing is we are about to embark on that journey. There is work going on right now in New Jersey with the Portal Bridge the Portal Bridge that is that brings you up to the tunnels to go into New York, that is being completely rebuilt. There are new bridges. We are starting work on the Baltimore tunnels. And that's going to deliver a great experience in 5 or 10 years, or in some cases more for our customers. But just like road construction on the interstate, that can also have impacts in the short term. So we want to be prepared for that. We know that there may be a period of pain for our customers, and that may be delays. That may just be reduced schedules as we have to change around our operations a little bit to accommodate many years of deferred maintenance and work that we're now undertaking. So one of the things we launched as a pilot project in 2022 is what we call proactive service recovery. So the traditional engagement model was you were on a train that was delayed, and if you were not happy with that delay, you would pick up the phone and call our contact center and speak to our agents. And that's great. Our agents are always there to help, but that's really not an ideal customer experience. Increasingly, customers, first of all, don't want to pick up the phone, and that's a hassle, and only a certain percentage of our customers are going to do that. So we started to look into how do we leverage all of this first-party data to improve that experience proactively before someone has to pick up the phone. So we launched a pilot project on Acela called Proactive Service Recovery. And that started to pull in. So we've traditionally had a lot of marketing data that was exposed to, say, our email channels. But our operational data, was the train on time? Did the train operate? That was entirely different data systems than any of our marketing, our customer data. So we undertook a project to start to combine those, where we can now build audiences and start to factor in that operational information in how we communicate to you. So we started this really was a loyalty play at first, so it was tightly integrated with the loyalty program. If you were on a delayed train, we would set thresholds, and if you were on a delayed Acela, we would email you after your trip completed, apology note, and say, we have issued you loyalty points. Now, if you were not a member, we would give you the opportunity to join the program. So it was also a program acquisition play to collect those points and to join the program and claim the points. We started very simple, started small, single route, and it was just a fixed number of points to start. We tested that. We have a metric we called CSI, Customer Satisfaction Index. Pretty much everyone who rides the train gets a CSI survey at the end of the trip. And so we started to then look at how that changed the CSI score. We started to adjust, bring in more variables, so length of delay would impact the compensation. One of the takeaways we had from that is that customers do not understand the value of loyalty points. So, and that's a little bit by design, right? That gives the brand some flexibility. But we also have the challenge that our points, if you take out a calculator, are the most valuable points in the entire industry. Whether you look at hotels, rental cars, airlines, an Amtrak Guest Rewards point is worth a lot more. But that is not necessarily recognized by customers. So if you say, well, I get 2,000 Amtrak Guest Rewards points, I mean, that could be 20,000 Hilton Honors points. But customers see 2,000, they say, well, Hilton's giving me 20,000. And there is that perception gap. And you don't necessarily want to peg and say, well, 2,000 points is worth this, because that's variable depending on how the customer chooses to redeem them. It could change over time, so we don't want to bind ourselves to any commitments. So really a lot of the feedback we were getting from customers is, I really appreciate that you reached out after this incident. 2,000 points is not enough, or 2,000 points, I don't know what they're worth, or what I really want is a refund. And so we started to build in additional capabilities with service recovery. So we started, now one of the challenges we have is our reservation system, where we take all of the customer reservations, is old. If anyone remembers Braniff Airways, it was the Braniff Airways reservation system. We bought it from them in the 70s. And we have highly customized it since then. It's IBM mainframe, like green screen. If you ever see the movies where the hackers are going in and the text is green, that's us logging into our reservation system. So we have built a lot of infrastructure on top of that as a contact center agent, a station agent, people are interacting with that data. But at the core, the reservation data is sitting on an IBM mainframe at an IBM data center running an ancient code. So touching that data is expensive. It is very hard to find people who have the skill set to do this. They are expensive to operate, and it takes a long time. It is also a critical system. That system, which we are looking at modernizing in the next few years, but that system controls a lot of our train operations, controls when the conductor's scanning your tickets, all that feeds back into that system. So you take that down, we have a tremendous revenue problem on our hands. So a lot of the strategy as we rolled out proactive service recovery is, how do we do things without touching using the mainframe. So we already have all the data that's in the mainframe extracted in different data sets we can query, all of that. But what we started to do is rather than issue, traditionally you would call up the contact center and they would issue you a voucher. And vouchers just, it's money that you can use to travel on Amtrak in the future. That's mainframe. They're typing it in the green screen. So to avoid an integration, we're using what is traditionally been a little bit more of a marketing, a promotional product, a coupon, but that is all abstracted from the mainframe. It runs on more modern processes. So there's been a huge technology strategy component as how do we do this nimbly? How do we do this inexpensively? How do we do this flexibly so that as we get results from our customers, we can change. And it's not a matter of coding in COBOL or whatever our reservation system uses on the back end to change that. We can do that in a modern platform. So we have now started to roll out coupons where we are now giving customers a fixed value to come back on board with us. In extreme cases, we are issuing refunds. So we send an apology note and we say, we're really sorry about what happened. You're going to get a refund in 7 to 14 days. Why 7 to 14 days? Because there is actually an agent in the contact center who has to manually process each refund. So again, mainframe system. So we are looking now, as we've looked at the data from the customer response to these emails, it is moving the needle in the CSI. We get about a 6 to 7 point increase if you have received proactive service recovery. And the way we figured that out, actually, is we did not want to just shut off or do an A/B test of proactive service recovery because the customers talk. Customers tweet, they post online, they compare notes. And if you had a customer on board a train and says, well, Amtrak gave me $50, and the other customer says, well, I didn't get anything at all for this same delay, that's not going to leave a great impression. So we actually had an outage, an unexpected outage for a period of time with some of the systems that sent out these communications. It lasted about 48 hours, and our market research team was able to use that as a control group to measure the impact of proactive service recovery. So turning lemons into lemonade a little bit, but we got some very effective learnings from that, and a lot of the rest of the data we collect is very much driven by that post-trip customer satisfaction survey. So we've leveraged that, and we continue to expand out where we've launched some new routes. So now in the state of Maine, the train up there is starting to use this infrastructure, and we are going to look at rolling it out across the country. So we've built that flexible platform, and depending on the situation, on what the data shows us, and then based on the customer response, we can serve something up to you as compensation. Where we're looking to go with that is the ability to take into account who you are as well. So right now we're looking at the delay situation. But if you're a first-time customer, if you are a customer who's been delayed your last 3 trips, those are different scenarios where we may want to vary the level of compensation. So the next iteration of this functionality is really bringing in a broader profile of the customer data and starting to customize really the level of compensation you get based on your relationship with the brand.
Great. So we've got a couple minutes left. Any questions?
As you think about the improvement to your CSI score, right? What value do you place on that? I mean, how do you sort of link those two? Is, hey, a 5-point improvement in CSI score means these customers are going to come back more often, versus this is how much we are sort of the points or the value of the points that you're giving for that. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do a lot of modeling on CSI, just generally outside of proactive service recovery, of looking at the linkage between CSI and return trip, and there's a very strong correlation. So we do have a model that shows a certain percentage increase in CSI increases the likelihood to return by a certain percentage. You can model that pretty exactly. A lot of what we're trying to do with CSI is diagnose what's going on. So delay, very obvious cause. But sometimes the complaint is, one of the things we noticed a few years ago is customers were complaining about the odor of the restrooms on board the train. We now have, if you travel in the Northeast, cleaners that come through mid-route to take care of that. So we use that, and we can quantify based on the improvements to the CSI. And we have a specific question around the cleanliness of the restrooms now that at least a portion of our customers are served with. So we do a lot to model that linkage between customer CSI, return trip behavior, and then also spend per trip. Because you could come back to us, but you could pay less of a premium. You could take Northeast Regional, our still speedy, but somewhat slower and slightly lower price service versus the Acela. If you say, hey, I'm not willing to spend for the premium. So we're looking at that as well. Yes?
I'm a Northeast Acela rider. As you upgrade the Acela trains, does that create opportunities for new high-speed routes? And are some of these new routes going to have welded track and high-speed service?
So great question. The answer is it depends. So and the question is, what is high speed? So if you go to Europe and you ask what high speed is, that is a different answer than in the United States. I would say so certainly with the new Acelas, with the infrastructure improvements, there will be time improvements associated with that. So a great example is, the new trains are capable of running faster. These are off-the-shelf European high-speed rail train sets that have been modified just to operate on American track, American power, but really the limitation is the infrastructure. So as you see the infrastructure improvements, the new tunnels in Baltimore, for example, we will be able to get in and out of Baltimore much faster, so that is going to shave time. Across the country, a lot of what we're looking for in these newer markets is what we would call higher speed, not high speed, so that still could be in excess of 100 miles an hour, right? We can have 100, 125 mile an hour running outside the Northeast, but in a newer market we come into, we're probably not looking at something equivalent to what we have between New York and DC today.
Thank you so much. Wow, right down to the wire.
Still on time, though.
Thanks.
No need for compensation here.